Hello! So I really enjoyed vlogging last week, so I decided to do that again this week with some books that I'm reading for Shorty September. I will link the information on that below. So I'm hoping to read 2 books this weekend and have it be sort of a climate fiction, speculative fiction vibe. So the first book that I'm planning to read is super short, and that is The Impossible Resurrection of Grief by Octavia Cade. So I saw Sage at Sage Reads talk about this. Something that really drew me in was the beautiful, beautiful cover. I don't know if you could see that, but also this book is about the extinction of several different species on Earth and how humans are reacting to that. There's this thing going through the world called the grief, where humans are mourning the loss of these different species, and it gets so bad that they can't really function and they eventually commit suicide. So it sounds interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how the grief manifests itself and how the different ecosystems are affected by different animals going extinct. So yeah, that's the first book. So the next book is a translated speculative fiction book, and that is The Membranes by ta-wei. The plot here is in a society affected by climate change, where people are now living underwater. I think there's a cyberpunk feel. There's definitely cyborgs in this society, and I know there's queer themes as well. In the description it says, ta-wei weaves dystopian tropes, heirloom animals, radiation-proof combat drones, sinister surveillance technologies into a sensitive portrait of one young woman's quest for self-understanding. It says she begins to explore her true identity, a journey that leads to questioning the bounds of gender, memory, self, and reality. So it sounds like there's going to be an exploration of technology and selfhood in this world. So it sounds really interesting. My boyfriend and I are actually going on a day trip today, which is our first little trip since moving into our new apartment. So I'll probably read a little bit on the way there and show some clips of our day. But yeah, I will check in soon with more about The Impossible Resurrection of Grief.
It don't change a thing. I remember yesterday like wedding bells and summer rain. I give to you my love, my life this ring. I'm so lucky just to be here with you. Be the one to if I could go somewhere next to you's the place I'm always gonna choose. 'Cause in my mind it's Santorini, and everything is gonna be okay.
Hi. So I finished The Impossible Resurrection of Grief, and I really enjoyed reading this book. I would give this book around 4 stars. I think that it was one of the most unique books I've read, and it kind of pulls on a lot of different genres: science fiction, climate fiction, horror, some fairy tale, some kind of action and mystery vibes as well. So it's a book that tries to do a lot of things in 80 pages. The book takes place in a world where, in the face of mass extinction of different animals, this phenomenon called the grief has been sweeping through humans, and basically nobody can figure out the commonality because everybody goes through grief in a different way. But almost always in the face of this mass extinction, people are grieving so much that they end up committing suicide. The main character, Ruby, has not succumbed to the grief. Their favorite species, which is a jellyfish, is not extinct and can actually adapt to some of the changes in the environment and thrives in it. And there's an interesting discussion in the book about when a certain species goes extinct, another one will thrive because they won't have that predator anymore hunting them, or something will affect the food chain and another species will flourish. There's some lovely description about jellyfish and the character's passion for them, which I really enjoyed. So the main character's good friend Marjorie studied coral reefs and obviously is going through the grief because as a scientist that was promoting saving the coral reefs, she feels as though she failed, and kind of this nihilistic attitude of nothing that we did was able to save the coral reefs. Marjorie turns into the sea witch. In the beginning of the book, Ruby is trying to break through the grief to Marjorie and get Marjorie interested in living a normal life again and engaged in all of the things that they were before. Very quickly, Ruby gets pulled into a group of many different people who are reacting to the grief that they're going through and moving through that grief differently. So we see everything from Marjorie to artists and scientists trying to create new versions of extinct species, which I won't go too much into since it's only 80 pages and I don't want to spoil anything. This book has an interesting reflection on the way we handle grief as a society, because people who are going through the grief are ignored, institutionalized, but also there are people going through the grief that can function in society or are able to mask the effects of the grief for their own ends. And I think this book is trying to ask us to take a look at our own grief and our own reactions to horrible things happening in the world, because we see anything from people feeling very defeated and having no more interest in life and solving these problems, to people on the other extreme end who are trying to get revenge and trying to remake society in the face of these losses for the environment. The Climate book club that's hosted by Sage, Wilma, and Sims Books picked this book a few months ago, and they were having an interesting discussion about mental health and activism and education, what self-care and management of grief and trauma we are bringing into this work, and how can we move past grief, guilt, bigger things like this that impact our ability to solve problems and to move forward past defeatism. Oh, also the main character's husband, George, is Indigenous, and there is discussion about people's sudden grief with the extinction of these animals. But where were these people and where was their grief when Native people were being removed from their homes and killed? So I liked that angle of the book. Ultimately, though, I did feel like even though there were some great ideas and really interesting things happening in this book, it wasn't a 5-star read for me, because in 80 pages the author tried to do so much and really could have added like 100 pages because parts of the book were very confusing, and it felt kind of like a lot of ideas were muddled together, but I would reread this book 100 times over anyways, because the ideas presented here were just so unique. So I think it's definitely worth a read, and I really enjoyed it. Next, I'm going to be picking up The Membranes by ta-wei, and I am super excited. So I will check in with you again when I am done with that.
Made it through. We know just what's good to do.
So, hi, I'm back. At this point, it's been like a few weeks since I've read Membranes, and this was one of those books that I didn't know how to talk about because everything that I do have to say is related to things that I didn't want to spoil in the book, but I ended up giving this 5 stars. Sorry if you can hear a bunch of clicking in the background. My boyfriend is playing a game. So this book is a sci-fi novel, but also kind of a drama. It follows Momo, who is a character in this society where people are living underwater because of the effects of the sun on people's skin. So it follows Momo's perception as a kid all the way up to her 30th birthday, and her experiences with her mother and her friend as a sick child that needs surgery, and as an adult in her job as a skin specialist in a world where people are really cognizant of their skin and its care because of the effects of the environment. So Momo is a very lonely character, and you see kind of her few relationships in the story, how they affect her life. And the story is very voyeuristic, so there are some parts that if you don't like that, you might not be a fan of. It was written in 1995, but it was able to predict a lot of scientific and digital advancements that we've had, but also imagine the way things might have progressed within the very specific capitalistic world that we live in. I think this book has a lot to say about privacy and surveillance, both in terms of like larger structures of government and our own experiences and relationships with family and ownership of our own lives, our identities. There's a lot of thoughts about gender identity and queerness in this book. I'm not normally a fan of world building, and I was looking at reviews for this book, and I think like some people disagree with me because that was one of the things people didn't like, because there is in the beginning a lot of info dumping. But I thought that it was so very interesting because I really liked the way the author took, their experiences of the world and its structures in 1995 and advanced this into the future. I thought it was all very plausible and very interesting. So it wasn't too much for me at all. There are also some twists and turns in this story which are super juicy, but the journey of the character and the world alone really interesting to me, and I would definitely recommend this book if you love science fiction or if you like stories that are about these big questions of identity and how our current world is affecting technology and resources and who has access and power. I enjoyed both of the books that I read in this vlog, but this book might be my new favorite of the year, or at least in the top 3 that I've read this year. It was fantastic, so I definitely recommend that you check it out if you're interested at all. So have you read any books recently that are your new favorites of the year? Let me know down below, or comment a little wave emoji if you liked the video but don't have a comment. And yeah, thanks for watching.